Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me for another of my interviews by popular demand. And because there is so much to do, my guest today is Stan McDonald. Hello, Stan.
Hello, Richard. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you back. Now, people, if you haven't seen some of our videos together, Stan's been telling us about the legal system in itself and some of the flaws and how we can use the system against itself to help ourselves. We've also looked at legal maxims, and recently we looked at the problem of the ULEZ and the 15-minute cities and how we can find the loopholes to get round of that. And it's safe to say that people have been inspired by our videos, your videos really. Have they been responding to you, Stan?
Yes, I've had people from various countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, send me emails direct, and sometimes they send emails to Richard, who
Yeah.
forwards them to me. I have two projects that your viewers have asked me to look into, which I will be. Uh, I have a future plan to address the all beloved council tax, and I
Fantastic.
have yeah, and I have another video that deals with property standards and property taxes in Ontario. And
Wow.
a third one will be coming out that deals with the Canadian legal system.
Superb.
So,
Well, I'm more than
yep.
happy to have you on the channel to help people because that's what it's all about. So to
Yes, the name of the game is to get people educated so that they can fight back against the tyranny, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and give them hope. I think people often think that legal stuff is too complicated and too expensive for them to deal with, and so they just acquiesce and go along with it. And
Correct.
um, and if there is an alternative system where we can use the legal system against itself, then so much the better. So
Right.
so today we are doing prime legislation. Is that what it's called?
Primary legislation,
Primary.
yes.
That was the word. Yes. You
Yeah.
can tell I'm the ignorant one, ladies and gentlemen, as indeed you should know. The intelligent one is there. So there we go, Stan. So where do we start then with primary legislation? What is it?
Well, this is where there's some debate, so I kind of labeled it primary legislation. Primary legislation to me goes back to the fundamental creation of the current legal system. Okay, if you look at the UK government website, you can trace stuff back 1200, 1300s, 1400s. But when the creation that all got changed around, and then they came up with the current government, and I call that primary legislation. Some people will argue and say, well, no, primary legislation is when a first statute was issued and then they revised it. Well, the primary one was the one before the revision. So somebody's got to draw a line somewhere. So I just say, okay, let's start with the basic fundamental rules that created our current government. And I call that primary legislation.
Right. And
Now, what
that
meant,
makes sense. That makes a
yes,
lot of sense.
yeah. And some people refer to it that way. Some laws actually refer to it the way I do. Other ones say, no, primary legislation is, the Highway Act before it was modified or something like that. But at the end of the day, do we really care? We're just getting back to the fundamental basics, going back to the roots of the creation of the government and creation of the law. And then from that, we can build our basis. Now, this, as I call primary legislation, works in the UK and it almost works anywhere else the British realm took over. Now, there are exceptions, and we have to get into that separately. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
Right.
But we're trying to deal with primary legislation, and the name of the game is to go back to the creation of government and say, okay, if this is the creation of government and you're currently doing XYZ, whatever, council tax, for example, or the ULEZ or whatever, is that is that contingent with the current legal system, or is that against what was the creation of the government, the creation of the legal system? And we find that 9 times out of 10, what they're doing currently violates the primary, as we could now call it, legislation. Now, where do you want to draw the line? So what I did is I said, well, I want to start from 1688 because that was the creation of the crown and the British monarch that we currently know today, right? And then we get into all kinds of different stuff, and you can follow that right through to the current stuff and say, well, where do we draw the line?
Mm.
I draw the line back in like 1720. And we're only going to go through the few basic rules. You guys can look the rest up, because after a certain time frame, and I'll get Richard to pull this up for you guys to show you where the current rules don't have, or the current statutes don't have royal assent. And
Right.
that's where I draw the line, because I say, well, it's supposed to have royal assent. So if it doesn't, it's void. I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise I would be looking through, I don't know, probably 1,300 pages of 200 acts and statutes. And so there's got to be rhyme and reason to it. So let's just
And
look
it
at the
should have.
primary stuff.
I mean, it should have royal assent. Otherwise, it doesn't come into. I mean, that's what I understood. If it doesn't have royal assent, it's not proper law or legislation.
Exactly. So if we look at that, we've narrowed our window down to what we can deal with.
Mm.
So I touched on this earlier, but we didn't get into it a whole lot. This was in the introduction to me, basically. And I covered a little bits of it here and there, and I covered a little bit about council tax, and a little bit about this, a little bit about that. And we want to expand on those to help the viewers to, learn what their rights are, learn what the law says.
Yeah.
Because as Richard says, a lot of people look at the law and go, holy, no, I don't want to touch this, because they're scared of it.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, if you're scared of it and you don't investigate it, then you don't really know where you're getting shortchanged, to put it politely.
Mm.
So if we look at the first act of Will and Mar, which, just to let the viewers know, Richard now has the PDF file of all these various acts that we're going to go through. I've given him the PDF copy so he can upload it to his website. And I also have a duplicate copy stored away, so if anybody requires it, I can send it to them as well. So if we look...
Yeah, I'm just bringing it on. Here we go.
Okay. Yeah, so the act of Will and Mar. Now, that's the whole act, and I got my cheat sheet, so I don't have to make you go through a whole bunch of stuff. But the act of Will and Mar basically created a government, okay? And if you looked at the top, it had the corporate seal, as I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
And so basically it says this act, it's settling disputes, because what they're doing is they're assembling the new government, or the new legal system, and they're dispensing with the old. Okay? That's basically what it comes down to.
Right.
Okay? So that was the creation of government. So if we start from 1688, there we go. Now, if you read through there, it talks about ecclesiastical thing, and if we go through the oath, which we didn't get into, you're going to find out all of this actually stems back to the church. So I'd like to know how the church has anything to do with legal matters, but anyway, that's what they did.
Right.
So the Act of Will and Mar sets out, if you look under freaking glasses here, if we look under an act that says Lord Spiritual, Temporal, and Commons in Westminster. Yeah, it's pretty small for me to read too, but
okay. So the Lord Spiritual. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, okay.
The Lord Spiritual and Temporal and Commons convened at Westminster the 2 and 20th day of January in the year of our Lord 1688. I'm doing this sight reading myself. And there, sitting on the 13th day of February following, are the two Houses of Parliament, and so shall be, and are hereby declared, enacted, and adjudged to be to all intents, constructions, and purposes whatsoever, notwithstanding any want of writ or writs of summons or any other defect of form or defeat whatsoever, as if they had been summoned according to the usual form. Bit of old English spelling in there, which when you're sight reading is a challenge.
Right. So that tells you right there, it created the two houses of government.
Right.
So that's it. Now we've got our current government system. Okay. Now if we go to the Bill of Rights is the next one.
The Bill of Rights for the next one. Yeah, hang on.
Yep.
I'm going to quickly find that. Where is it? Here it is.
Yeah, and if you scroll down, it says subjects' rights.
Let's have a look. Scrolling. Doing this in real... Here we go. The subjects' rights.
Yeah, you want to read that?
And thereupon said that I wish I could have some reverb or something, which just, add a bit of a sort of authority to this. And thereupon said the Lords Spiritual and Temporal and Commons, pursuant to their respective letters and elections, being now assembled in a full and free representative of this nation, taking into their most serious consideration the best means of attaining the ends aforesaid, do, in the first place, as their ancestors in like case have usually done, for the vindicating and asserting their, there's a word, what is that, autient rights and liberties, declare, and there's a whole load of things here which they declare.
So they're telling you right there, they're basically going to uphold the subjects' rights, and you're the subject of the Queen, because this was done under basically a contract or an agreement. Now it says if you go down a little, it says levying money. What's it tell me there?
It says the levying money for or to the use of the crown by pretence of prerogative without grant of Parliament for longer time or in any other manner than the same is or shall be granted is illegal.
Right. So every court case that says R versus whatever, which is Regina, which represents the crown, is when they say they're doing this on behalf of the crown. Well, guess what? That's illegal because it doesn't have the crown's consent.
Ah, right.
Right. So now if we go to dispensing of power, which is slightly down from there.
Let's see if I've gone past it.
I think we went past it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, at the top. Here we go. Dispensing power, that the pretended power of suspending of laws or the execution of laws by regal authority without consent of Parliament is illegal.
Right. So therefore, if it doesn't have consent of Parliament, then it's illegal. Right. Plain English. Nothing wrong with that. Now it says ecclesiastical courts are illegal underneath, right where your mouse or your cursor is there. Yeah.
That the commission for erecting the late court of commissioners for ecclesiastical causes and all other commissions and courts of like nature are illegal and pernicious.
There you go. So if now we know that everything that's done through the court is supposed to have the seal.
Right.
Okay. Now we're going to get into some real interesting work here in a few minutes, but now if we go to the coronation oath, is the next act we need to look at.
Oh right. Okay. Hang on. Let me dispense with that one.
Yep. And I'm trying to keep this meeting short because
no, that's all
right. Usually I go on for an hour and a half.
Right. What am I looking for? Did you say the coronation oath?
1688. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't got that one on the screen here, but I'm bringing it up now. Here we go. So, Coronation Oath 1688.
Yep, and if you just read the first paragraph, yep, right there.
Where it says, oath hereto framed in doubtful words. That's an interesting way of putting it. Whereas, by the law and ancient usage of this realm, the kings and queens thereof have taken a solemn oath upon the evangelists at their respective coronations to maintain the statute, laws, and customs of the said realm, and all the people and inhabitants thereof in their spiritual and civil rights and properties. But forasmuch as the oath itself on such occasion administered hath heretofore been framed in doubtful words and expressions with relation to ancient laws and constitutions at this time unknown to the end, therefore that one uniform oath may be in all times to come taken by the kings and queens of this realm, and to them respectively administered at all times of their and every of their coronation. So does that mean that they have to take? They've now said that there've been many oaths, but they've now framed it down to one.
Well, yeah. So any time a king or queen takes the throne, if you will, or takes position within the crown, they have to swear an oath to the crown.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, it is also, before you close that, there's section IV, it says, because I'm just getting rid of the Roman numeral part of it. Okay. Section 4. Yeah, section 4. IV. So if you read what that...
Yeah, IV. Oath to be administered to all...
Says you'll have the rest of it.
Yeah. And the said oath shall be in like manner administered to every king and queen who shall succeed to the imperial crown of this realm at their respective coronations by one of the archbishops or bishops of this realm of England for the time being, to be there unto appointed by such king or queen respectively, and in the presence of all persons that shall be attending, assisting, or otherwise present at such their respective coronations, any law, statute, or usage to the contrary notwithstanding.
Right. So it's telling you right there that every future person has to take the oath. Okay. And now it says otherwise the respective coronations, any law, statutes, or usage to the contrary notwithstanding. So it's putting into question now, this person has to have this oath before they can implement some kind of a new law or new statute.
So they have to do that before they can give the royal assent.
Well, they have to. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at the Act of Settlement, which is another one.
Yeah. Coming up.
Mm-hmm. Act of Settlement 1700.
Here we go. Act of Settlement 1700, and
the laws and statutes of the realm confirmed is what you're looking for.
Right, okay. So, because there's a lot of text, I'm glad you didn't make me read all that lot.
Oh, heck, no, I'm not going to do that to you.
What did you say? I'm looking at laws and statutes withheld. Here we go.
Confirmed.
Laws and statutes of the realm confirmed. Here we go.
There you go.
And whereas the laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof, and all the kings and queens who shall ascend to the throne of this realm ought to administer the government of the same according to the said laws, and all their officers and ministers ought to serve them respectively according to the same. The said lords, spiritual and temporal and commons, do therefore further humbly pray that all the laws and statutes of this realm for securing the established religion and the rights and the liberties of the people thereof, and all the other laws and statutes of the same now in force, may be ratified and confirmed, and the same are by his majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the said lords spiritual and temporal and commons, and by authority of the same, ratified and confirmed accordingly.
Right. So what did it tell us in the first sentence? It was the birthright of the people, and all kings and queens who ascend the throne shall basically follow that. Right?
Right, yeah.
Now, it also says here that, where the heck are we here? The force may be ratified and confirmed by the same, by his majesty, and with the advice and consent of lords spiritual, temporal, and commons, and by the authority of the same, ratified and confirmed accordingly. That's telling you that all the acts and statutes that come from 1700 forward have to follow the same protocol.
Right.
Right? So how do we know if this protocol was ever followed? Now let's go into the Great Seal Act 1688.
The Great Seal. Okay. Bear with me, caller. The Great Seal. Here it is. The Great Seal Act 1688.
Yep.
You want the first paragraph?
Yeah, jurisdiction, right there.
Jurisdiction of commissioners and the Great Seal doubted. Whereas their most excellent Majesty King William and Queen Mary have thought fit that the office of the Lord Chancellor or Lord Keeper of the Great Seal of England should be executed by commissioners appointed for the same under the Great Seal of England. And whereas several authorities, jurisdictions and powers are, by several acts of Parliament and otherwise, vested, settled, and placed in the Lord Chancellor of England, or the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal of England, for the time being, now for preventing of all doubts and questions that may arise, whether all or any of those authorities, jurisdictions, and powers may be exercised by such commissioners.
Right. So it's telling you right there that the Lord Chancellor is supposed to be the one that commissions all these acts and statutes.
Right. And
no.
Does he do it?
No. No.
Right.
So
no,
so let's go to the Treason Act 1695.
Right. Okay. Bear with me, young fella, my lad. Here it goes.
Yep.
Oh, I'll show it anyway. This was the one I struggled to get. For some reason, it's not coming up.
Okay.
I just see if it will download or anything. I don't know why that's not coming up. Let me just see if I can find it online as we...
Yeah, treason. Okay, show the viewers how you look this stuff up.
Yeah, no, I will. I'm going to just find the page. Bear with me.
Yep.
I've got to just slide the. So this is what I'm getting at the moment. Here we go, and let's just drop that down a bit so you can see.
That's crazy. Okay.
So let me just do
Treason Act.
Yeah, here we go.
Now go to the Gov site. Yeah, look. Now watch this. Scroll down a little bit. This is how I find stuff. And you're looking for 1695, so you got the right one.
See, oh, right at the top. Look at that.
There you go.
So you want me to read that now?
The first paragraph, just the first paragraph.
Okay, let's. Why am I only getting half the page here? Hang on, just bear with me one second because I can't find the scrolly button. There it is. Right, here we go. It says, whereas nothing is more just and reasonable than that persons prosecuted for high treason and misprison of treason, whereby the liberty lives on. I'm not very good at this. Liberty, lives, honour, estates. What does that say? Blood and prosperity of the subjects may be lost and destroyed, should be justly and equitably tried, and that persons accused as offenders therein should not be debarred of all just and equal means of defence of their innocences in such cases, in order thereunto, and for the better regulation of trials of persons prosecuted for high treason and misprison of such treason. You may have to interpret that for me.
No problem. Basically, if you read the first part of that, it tells you that anybody that's trying to step on your rights of the Queen's subjects, if you want to look at it that way, should be tried for treason. So if anybody's going against the Queen, or the Crown, if we want to call it that, which they do every day, then those people should be tried for treason.
Right.
Simple enough, because they're going against the Queen or against the monarch or the Crown, call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
So now, if we use that as the basis for every law in the UK or any other realm which doesn't have a constitution, which we're going to get into in another different presentation, then technically they're committing treason. Now, find out, if you don't mind Google searching one thing for me, Richard.
Yeah.
Find out when the last act was received royal assent.
Right. Hang on.
You'll find out now. It says it's a formality. Like, what kind of crap is that?
So, what am I looking for? It's last act.
Yeah, last act or
given royal
assent, basically. And you'll find out it was in the 1700s at some point. Oh, here we go.
Here we go. So
1854, I think it said there. Yeah, 1854.
Yeah, 1854. The act was repealed and replaced by the Royal Assent Act of 1967, according to Wikipedia, I think.
Mm-hmm. So that's telling you they're changing. They're trying to mess with fundamental, as we call it, primary legislation.
Ah, right. Which they're not allowed to do.
Well, how can they do it? If they didn't create it, how can they modify it and scrap it? Because it said in our earlier documents, it may be amended, right? So they can adjust it. It didn't say they were allowed to throw the whole thing in the garbage.
No.
Right? So there's your problem. Now, these arguments that they're here, they can be used against council tax or any other, the ULEZ thing, because it's depriving the Queen's subjects of the fundamental rights to life, liberty, and happiness.
Yes.
Right? Now, a lot of times people come to me and they say, yeah, okay, but the court system's corrupt, Stan. What the heck are you going to do about it? We have a remedy, and we're going to actually use the court within the court. So we're not trying to deviate and generate our own court system or anything like that. We can use the existing system, and then if it fails us, then we have the right to go to a common law court because we've exercised all of our remedies that were supposed to be available to us.
Right. Oh, that's an interesting thing. So use their system first, and then if that fails, use the higher power of the common law.
Common law, yes. And we'll do a separate presentation on that because it's quite lengthy.
Right. Okay.
But that's now people say, okay, well, Canada has the same. We're under the British Commonwealth or so. Well, actually, we are, but we aren't, because a lot of that was illegal. So that's a separate seminar, separate webinar. But these fundamental laws that we used here are applicable to the UK and other realms, provided there's nothing that contradicts it. And so now we can use this as the basis for our arguments in council tax.
Right.
Because one of the things we talked about earlier is we have the right to intercourse, and intercourse just means engaging with other people.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't mean, something derogatory. We'll just leave it at that. So therefore, if they're trying to now put in the ULEZ and deprive us of life, liberty, happiness, and a way to live or have a living and basically survive, well, that's a deprivation of our fundamental rights. And if we use these basic concepts, the next thing we got to do now is put it into a letter or a document.
Right. Yes. Because it's all very well sort of knowing we can point to things and say, well, this proves that we should be able to knock this into a cocked hat. It's actually then, as you say, actually getting into the action of it. And so letter writing is the first part, is it?
Yes, and we have you have a document, the chancellor's document, I think I called it, or chancellor's something or other.
Right. Let me just have a quick look down here.
Now, if you remember what we just discussed, the chancellor is basically in charge of all the court systems within the UK.
It's not there. Hang on. I'm just looking for it.
Yeah, no worries. But the chancellor is supposed to deal with all these legal matters. Now, I've taken the steps necessary to address the chancellor regarding council tax.
And have you?
Yes, and I got back this nice little piece of junk, which if this thing will focus, I don't know. It doesn't focus. Worth the crap. Okay, anyway, I did this, and I'll deal with it later. But anyway, basically, they told me that they can't deal with nothing. So if the chancellor, who's supposed to be dealing with something, can't deal with something, and that's their job, and we have the chancellor document if Richard could find it.
Yeah, I've got it, but it's another one of those that's not coming up. So I'm just going to do. Presumably, I can do a search for it. So let's.
Yeah. Okay, maybe. Anyway, the chancellor is supposed to be in charge of the courts. You guys seen that with the this Great Seal Act?
What was it called again? The Chancellor Act.
Well, I don't know what it was called, Richard. Tell you the truth, it was just it was a document I found, and it was basically their duties.
Right. I don't know why it's not loading
up. The duty of the chancellor. So if I sent basically now a letter back that says this is the duty of the chancellor, so why aren't you doing it? And so basically, because he's in charge of the entire UK court system, right? He's abandoned his public office, or malfeasance, or breach of public trust. Call it whatever you want. So he's going to be getting a letter along with the document Richard can't pull up for some strange reason.
Yeah, and, it's just not loading. I don't know why.
Don't know. But anyway, now what's going to happen is he's going to be served a notice. Basically, it says this is your job, so therefore you should readdress my points as related to council tax. Because what they like to do is hot potato, and they'll throw it to the next guy, and the next guy throws it to the next guy, and eventually you get frustrated and aggravated, and you just say, "Out of heck with it." Well, that means they win because you didn't do anything. You didn't fight it, right?
Right.
Right. You gave up. And if you go back to our legal maxims, the one who leaves the battlefield first loses.
So you mustn't leave. You've got to keep fighting on. Yeah.
And that's the problem. Like if you start a legal action, and we'll do a separate webinar on that. But if you start a legal action with somebody and then halfway through you just say, "Out of heck with it," and you walk away from it, the other side will come after you for their legal expenses because more than likely they hired a lawyer.
Right.
Or they want compensation for their own time.
Yes.
So anybody that wants to challenge this stuff, a court case can take 2, 3, 4 years. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
I knew one case that was in court for 6 years. It was a simple divorce case. I went there, and in 4 months I solved it. It was done. And it was settled out of court. And this is where we want to get into, is where we can settle stuff out of court.
Yes. Save the expense and time.
Yes, and what we can do, there's a certain method we can go through, and we can get a judgment before we even go anywhere. We can do the proper paperwork, and there is none of this, affidavits and cross-examinations and all this. If we can do it right by these government bureaucrats that turn around and don't do anything, we can say, here's our evidence. Here's where you should have responded. You didn't do it. So then we can go to the actual court and say, now we're just here for judgment.
Right.
The facts
Brilliant.
are already established, so we can get rid of all that crap. And there is a legal way to do it, and it's within their own system, so we're not going to violate anything.
No, and it's good that it's within their own system. I mean, they made the rules. They're only applying them, and they may not like it.
They may not like it, but that's why I tell everybody, and that's why I gave Richard those documents. If you're going to take on a certain task, whether it's to deal with the medical procedure that, some people took that perhaps shouldn't have, or maybe they
Mm.
should have, who knows? That's up to them. But if you were forced out of your job because of that, or forced to take this,
Substance.
procedure, yeah, then you have a legal recourse. Now, ultimately, you have the choice. Okay, and I don't want to clamp down too hard on people, but you can say no,
Mm.
right? There is a Nuremberg trial, and they basically said people can't go through any medical procedure without their consent. But most people didn't know that, or they were fearful of losing their job. Some people, took it and regretted. Some people have no issues with it for now.
You couldn't give your consent unless you knew what the outcome of this thing was, or what was indeed in it. And a lot of people weren't really told. It was a sort of very blurred sort of thing. Oh no, it's the only thing around that's safe and effective. And so people, in some ways, were unable to give that. I mean, they may have sat there and let them stick something into their arm, but that's
Yep.
not real consent. It's being forced into it and duped by the propaganda from government and mainstream media.
Isn't that what happens with anything the government wants to do? Like this
Exactly.
ULEZ, we were not informed of ULEZ. We don't know the costs that theoretically the taxpayers are footing the bill.
Mm.
We don't know the costs of where council tax expenditures go. They won't even disclose that. They give you some garbage, say, well, we disclose sufficient information. It might not even be relative to what you're asking for.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to now go through, and there's a legal procedure we can follow to do that. And that's a topic for another seminar, but basically it involves requesting information from the government, which they have to follow and they have to tell you. No, that doesn't mean they do it, but they're supposed to. And so we can now use this to start building our building blocks to go after our next case, if somebody wants to.
Yeah, and I
So
suppose you can imagine if, I mean, if just one person does it, it's an irritant for the government. But if 10,000 people do it, it becomes a serious issue.
yes, and that's a perfect statement, Richard, because what happens with a lot of people that try to challenge the government in whatever respect, whether it's council tax, property tax, income tax, I don't care. They all come back and they always use the same argument, opto pseudo litigant, or free man on the land. And typically they go to the case of Meads versus Meads, even though that's an Alberta Queen's Bench court case in Canada.
Oh, right.
But because, see, here's the thing, and some of you viewers asked me this. Well, you quoted some stuff and they called it Indian law. I don't know what the heck they were talking about. Most of it was U.S. law when it dealt with legal maxims. Well, the thing is, any court case that happens that's part of the British Commonwealth, I'll put that in quotes, can be referenced. So this is why they brought in Meads versus Meads, even though it's a Canadian court case
Right.
and it's in the UK. Like, what's the connection here? Right? There technically is no connection because, and we'll get into this later, but in Canada, Canada is no longer part of the British Commonwealth anyway. It was started with the British North American Act, which was never properly put in place. And then there was the Statute of Westminster, which was, again, not properly put in place. Then there was the Baldwin Act, which was another creation of the government, which, again, wasn't put properly in place. And then we put in the Constitution in 1982, which was never accepted by all provinces, so therefore it doesn't exist. So where's Canada in this equation? It's sitting there, it's free and clear to do whatever the heck it wants.
Right.
The people are. Canada's
Yeah.
a corporation, and they're all corporations. And that gets into the Clearfield Doctrine, and the Clearfield Doctrine states that if one corporation has an objective or whatever, it can't force it onto anyone without a contract. And we'll do all a separate presentation on contracts and to help people get further ahead. But with this basic understanding we now have, we can use this for the basis of any court case, at least in
Right.
the UK.
Yes. because we can just keep referencing back to this primary legislation.
Yes, and I call primary legislation, as I say, the fundamental building blocks. I don't call primary legislation the Highway Traffic Act before it was amended or something like that.
No.
So it's just my interpretation, my way of doing it.
Yeah, but if you were taking this to court though, and you were citing, whatever it is, the Bill of Rights or the Act of Settlement or the Great Seal, will the courts accept that? I mean, they sort of have to, don't they?
They're supposed to, but we're not in a lawful court system anyway, so
No.
who knows? And this is where we want to get into the next phase of doing this within their system, but without their judge. And we're just going to ask the judge to render a verdict in our favor based on our evidence. We have a way to do that. We'll do a separate presentation on that too. But I'm building things so people can see the basic, where we go, step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yes.
So I don't get into some complicated thing and the guy goes, what the heck's he talking about? Because we haven't covered these subjects.
Yeah.
So I'm doing them in a sequential order.
And I appreciate that. And for a lot of people, a lot of this, there's a lot to take in. You've been doing this for how long did you say? 40 years, 30 years?
37 years now.
37 years now, getting on for 40 years. So it takes time to sort of get into that mode where you can think in that way without, and be able to sort of navigate the maze of it all. To people listening and to myself, there's a lot of taking it at face value and going, okay, I understand that. And then slowly, with your help, we start to see the light.
Well, that's why I don't just quote whatever my opinion is or something off some, page I wrote down. I actually have you bring it up from the website, so it can't be, well, Stan put up some garbage and it doesn't mean anything. Right. We're pulling it right from the UK government website.
Yeah, which then gives it the what is it, the quality? I'm thinking the credibility or legitimacy of the fact that it is from the website. So it's their rules that we're quoting, not something else.
That's right. And that's the thing. A lot of people try and, put their thumbprint and they, do something else and sign across a stamp. And that's all fine and good in playland. But in reality, we have to follow the system. Yeah. And we need to do a presentation on how to do court paperwork. Yes. Because I've been getting people, they say, well, how do you do this? And where do you find all this? That's why I have Richard pull stuff up and he just uses Google, right?
Yeah. That anybody can use.
Anybody can use it, so this is why I do it that way. And we'll do a separate presentation for Canadian people because I want it. There's a specific presentation I want to get out relatively quickly. But now we got the basics of this down, and whenever Richard's available, we can do another one on council tax. And I've divided council tax into 2 parts because it's fairly lengthy. The first part of the council tax issue will deal with the legal arguments against council tax, which I already have that done. And the second part will be dealing with the paperwork if you're summoned to court. And then a secondary portion now will deal with how to deal with the bailiffs.
Right. And just from my viewer's point of view, my intention is to separate all these videos with Stan, and on my webpage, just have one page so you can go through them, and I'll put a little summary of what each one is about so that you can keep cross-referencing and come back and all of that and listen to my complete ignorance of it as Stan tells us how it should be done.
Well, no, everybody's here to learn. That's the thing. There is no stupid question. There's only my stupid answer, right? But my answer will be based in the law, so it's not something I dreamed up and,
Absolutely.
One of the things that screws it up is people do this free men on the land and they, I signed it, but I didn't read it or some other garbage. And it's that type of stuff that creates this free men on the land argument. And I'm not using any of that.
Yeah, no, I understand that. We're using their system to defeat them. And
right.
And if they've got the loopholes and all of that, and I mean, they're not, as you said earlier, they're not even playing by their own rules. So, but we have to play by their own rules because then we're in honour and we're truthful, and then it shows up how they're not playing by the rules, which acts in our favour. But we have to know we have to know what the rules are so that we can point out when they're not doing it. Because otherwise, who knows? Very often you just get these summonses, and it's like in the council tax, as far as I understand, they send you a summons on their own paper from the council, and they're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to come from the court. But
Exactly.
So you get these sort of things. But anybody who doesn't know will go, "Oh, crikey, I've got a summons." So and then they just take it as face value that the court has summoned them, not just some idiot in the council just typing it out on council paper. But we'll get into that in the next presentation, presumably.
Yes.
So is that, are we wrapped up with our primary
legislation. Yeah.
You're regretting getting mixed up with me now, I understand.
No worries. Now, if the viewers have a specific topic they want covered, let me know. Richard has my contact info. He's got permission to share it on the bottom of the video.
Yeah.
And I've given him the PDF file so you guys can download it. I would download that stuff and save it because there may be a day where we can't get access to that.
Yes, absolutely. Right? I'll make them all available, and they'll be on the website on a special page.
Sounds good.
Grand. Right. So for now, ladies and gentlemen, big thanks to Stan for coming back and going through this. And in our next presentation, we'll be looking at the dreaded council tax. So do join us for that. Meantime, thank you so much, Stan. Really appreciate your time and efforts on getting this information out. And we'll be back very soon. So until next time, from Stan and I, goodbye.